So we're back in Qualtrics. Hopefully we can get through pretty quickly today and then save some time for some questions, but we are talking about workflows. And if you remember from yesterday, we talked about the Qualtrics framework, which is listen, understand, act. We're going to go a little out of order because tomorrow we're going to talk about reporting, which is more of the understand side of things. And today we're going to talk about the act side of things, which is our workflows. So I'm going to pop back into the sandbox survey that we were working on yesterday and the day before. And we've talked about the survey builder, we've talked about survey flow, theming, and survey options. And so we're just going to continue going across the top here. We touched on distributions just a little bit, how we talked about query strings, how you can use an anonymous link. But here's where you grab that anonymous link when you're ready to go publish your survey. Again, you can hyperlink that. Every survey, if you remember, has a unique survey ID in here, so that's going to be included in that link. And you'll see that we've swapped out Qualtrics with engage.iowa.gov. We use that vanity domain so that people are more trusting of your survey because they see iowa.gov on there. So there's your anonymous link. And today we're going to pop into workflows over here. So workflows are automations that happen after your survey is taken. We have several different types of workflows, but our framework for the workflow is going to be three parts. First is the trigger, second will be the conditions, and third will be the task. So trigger, conditions, and tasks. So you'll go ahead and hit this, create a workflow. And first it's going to ask for the trigger. So the two that we typically use are start when an event is received or start at a specific time. Those are the two most common, but this one by far is the most common. 95% of workflows probably start with a survey being submitted. So I'm going to show examples of that today. So I have two options here. There are more options. For example, if you need a trigger based on a JSON event from a different platform, that's something that you'll build out your survey and then just let Jessica or I know when you go through that review process. We asked that question about, do you have a ticketing system? Do you have other automations? You'll be able to include that information. Again, this is just so that we can help you get your survey created and launched as quickly as possible, because the workflow can sometimes be a holdup if you're trying to build that piece out, and we want to be able to point you in the right direction to get you up and going quickly. So if you do need something additional, just let us know. But again, most of your workflows are going to start with a survey response because they come post somebody taking a survey. So I'll go ahead and click here. The settings that we have here are pretty straightforward. We want this for newly created responses. This is a little bit deeper, but if you can kind of filter out whether you want this to trigger on an API response, if it's updated via the API. And then include imported responses and include incomplete responses. We talked about incomplete responses yesterday a little bit, where in the survey options, we said, well, what do you want to do with incomplete responses? Do you want to close them out? Do you want to delete them? And so you'll have to decide if you want to include those or not. You can also include import responses. Just be careful with this. If you are importing a couple thousand responses and you turn on this workflow, then it's going to run that workflow a couple thousand times. So by default, that one's off, but if you need to run that as you're importing things, then go ahead and turn it on. So I'm going to hit save and we'll just roll with these default settings here. So our first piece is already done, the trigger. That's the first part of our framework. Qualtrics knows that it's going to run this workflow whenever a survey response is submitted. And I'm building from within that sandbox survey, so it's already tied to the survey. I'm going to hit this little blue plus, and we're going to click on add a decision. I used the word conditions. I think they just barely changed it to decisions. but it's going to say follow the branch if, and then I put my conditions right here. Typically, when we do these workflows, the most common example on the CX side of things when it comes to surveys is we will have some sort of a workflow based on when people say that they were extremely dissatisfied. Then we want to run a workflow so that we can maybe reach out to them, see what's going on and fix their problem. Or if you've seen, sometimes you've taken a survey or a form and they've asked the question, would you like us to reach out to you? If you click yes on that, then you have gone down one of their branches where you meet the criteria for them to trigger a workflow to reach out to you. And so that's what I'll do here. And we've talked about some of these conditions before. Typically, it's based off of a question, but you can also do embedded data. We talked yesterday about creating embedded data fields to tag certain people. And so if you do have logic sets that are happening over and over again, instead of doing all that logic each time, maybe it's easier to just tag that group like we did yesterday. We did, if they're green and agreeable, then we tag them as true as an embedded data field. So I could do that, or I could just do it based off of a question. I think that's what we'll do here. Let's say we want this one to run for everybody who selected yellow as their favorite color. So if yellow is selected, then we are going to fire this workflow. So that's the conditions. I can save this decision right here, and then I just continue down this branch, and it's just moving down, doing these steps one at a time. If I need an otherwise, so if I want one thing to happen if it's all yellow, and I want something else to happen if it's not yellow, then I can edit this decision branch and I can add an otherwise branch. And I'll save that, and you'll see that it splits into two. Just be careful about this. Sometimes people try to put all of their workflows into one. I'm going to call this email to yellow selection. I'm naming my workflow up here, and I can close out of it. I can create more than one workflow for every survey. And so sometimes I see people trying to do every single workflow, and they have tons and tons of branches over here, and it can get messy because you have to keep in mind all of those conditions. And so be careful. What I would recommend, rather than doing the otherwise branch, is just to go in here and create a new workflow and say, okay, if red is selected, then do this. If blue is selected, then do this. You can also copy these workflows if it's an extensive workflow that you've created. I can make a copy, and then I can just go switch the conditions and maybe the wording so that things are different. But let's get back into our workflow. I'm not going to do this otherwise branch. And Jessica, do you have a question?
I just want you, when you get to it, just emphasize when is a good time to understanding why important to name the workflows. We need to emphasize that for the rare case of transferring it. So just make sure that we always name the workflow. Can you emphasize that a little bit? Maybe always include maybe the survey ID or something to help identify for possible transfers if need be?
Yeah, good question, or a good call out, rather. So there are many times when you guys are building the surveys that as you're building it, you might already think, hey, this probably won't live in my account forever. This is probably going to go to a service account. If we need to transfer that survey, we transfer the surveys and workflows differently. They kind of live separately in Qualtrics. And so if you're able to name your workflow and add the survey ID to the end, or at least the name of the survey. And remember, the survey ID can be found up here in your URL, SV underscore. So I'm just going to add that to the end of this so that when this survey gets transferred, if we ever find this workflow just kind of floating around, we know that it belongs to that one. There's other ways of finding it. It's not the end of the world if you don't have it in there. We can always track it down, but this just makes it from first glance easy for us if we need to transfer it. Awesome. Okay, so we have our trigger and we have our conditions or decisions. And now we're going to hop into the task. Okay, so this is where I could go on and on and on about all the different things that Qualtrics can do. There's normally like 50 to 60 different tasks in here, but we've narrowed it down just a little bit just so that you're not kind of wading through all of these tasks that aren't as commonly used. And we've left the ones that you likely will be using. But if you're in the help pages, if you're Googling something and you see that Qualtrics has a workflow task that maybe integrates with what you're doing, one example that I don't think we have on here that I've seen is people using Salesforce. We do have a direct integration with Salesforce that acts as a workflow. So if that's something you need, I'm just mentioning that so that you know that it is there. You might just have to reach out to us. That's one where we have to get into contact with the Salesforce admin, make sure that we have the right credentials for the integration. But we definitely want to use any integrations that we have. They're great. Another one that is not on here is our web service API. So if you've heard that Qualtrics is great with API, it's true, we are, but API does require a little bit more setup, and we want to make sure, again, we're doing the API and the endpoints are in the right place and things like that. So if you do need to integrate with a system that doesn't have a direct integration with Qualtrics, just let us know. Interestingly enough, the most common system that I integrate with via API is Qualtrics itself. And so I'll have times where I use the Qualtrics API to go update a response or to go get a response. We talked about yesterday the API where I can go into Google Maps and calculate the distance between two places and then return that number. We do that all the time in Qualtrics as well. We go into another survey, we find a previous response, and we bring back that data. And so that API is powerful. It's just kind of an open box thing. And so if you do need to use it, please let us know and we'll help you get it set up. So I want to look at some of the more simple ones today just to get started. And then obviously I'm excited to see what you guys do with it. But let's take a look at the email one. We'll start there. So this simply is going to send an email, right? When somebody has responded and they've selected yellow as their favorite color. So the first field that we see in here is the to. Maybe this is going to a service inbox. I'm trying to think of maybe like service.com.iowa.gov. I know that's not a real email, but it's probably an @ there we go, service@dom.iowa.gov. If I want a notification for when this is happening, maybe this is a shared inbox, something like that, or I can have it go to my own email. If you do need to add more than one, just do comma separated, Qualtrics.com. So now it's going to the two of us. Another thing that's probably even more useful is the pipe text feature over here. If you remember when we were creating this survey, we did a form field question where we asked for email. So I'm going to go find that right here under pipe text in from a survey question. I think we have please provide your information, and I'm going to pipe in email right there. And so I just leave it just like that. It has the code for it. So whatever they entered in that email box, it will populate right here. Down here, the from address. This part of the email address doesn't have to exist. But this end part, the domain, does need to exist. So you could do Qualtrics survey, or if you're IPers, maybe you just do IPers. But then over here, this drop down, there are a few, we have quite a few Iowa domains that we've already added to the platform. So DPS is here, HHS is here, Gov Office is there. DOM is there, DOT is there. So there's quite a few that are already added. If your agency hasn't been added yet, we will need your domain credentials in order to get it added. So again, just reach out to Jessica. We'll make sure we get your domain added, but this is your from domain so that it looks like it's coming from your agency. So I'm going to change this. I think we do have, okay, we do have IPERS. I'm using IPERS as my guinea pig. IPERS@IPERS.org. There's probably better ones, but for the from name, this can be anything you want. Qualtrics results, or maybe you want to do survey results. Oops. Survey results. And then the reply to email, even though IPERS@IPERS.org might not exist, your reply to email, if you want to get replies, this should exist. If you don't want to get replies, then do something like no reply at IPERS.org. So again, this can be real or not, depending on if you want replies. And you also do not have to use, for example, the domain Gmail is not there. Not that you guys would be using Gmail, but Gmail is not a valid domain here, but you can still use it here because it's a reply to email. Let me change this back to IPERS.org. Okay. Subject line, put in a subject that makes sense, that doesn't look like it's a phishing email or something like that. Make sure it has correct information, avoid exclamation points. You can also pipe text into the subject line. So if you want to pipe in their name or something like that, you can do that. So I'll just put subject in here. When you want it to send, you can delay it, or you can just have it go as soon as they fill it out. I'm almost always using immediately. And then your message over here. One thing that's pretty awesome about this is just the ability to really customize this. You can use the HTML source if you're good at code and you want to make your email look really pretty, you can do that. I've even used ChatGPT and I've asked it to use HTML to customize this email, and it's made a great looking email with borders and things like that. But the other thing I wanted to call out is the ability to use pipe text in here. So I can say hello, and then I'm going to pipe in, if you remember, they did give us their first name. Let's see. Please provide your information. I'll pipe in their first name right here. So this will say, hello, Hunter. Here are your survey results. Okay. And then there's two ways that I can, if I do need to send those survey results to them, there's two ways I can do it. One is I can just type them all here, question 1. And then pipe in question 1 right here. What is your favorite color? When I pipe it in, I'm going to go for selected choices in this case. This is whatever they clicked on. So selected choices, question 1. And then I move on to the next one, question 2. I've seen people use the table feature in here, and they've made a nice table. You just put the attribute or header and then the pipe text in the second column. That looks really nice. Or if you don't want to pipe in everything, you can include this response report. This is essentially a PDF of their full response. Some people choose to do that. Other people think, well, I don't want them to see everything. I just want them to see a few of the questions that they answered. And if they only need to see a few, then I recommend just piping in their questions here. Okay, so that's the email. Let's see if there's anything else I want to include on here. Something that I do recommend on these types of emails is to add an agency logo or something like that. Up at the top, you can, your agency might already have a graphic in your library. So in this library, for example, I know I'm using IPERS as kind of my guinea pig, but we'll just do blind because it's the first one up here. I have my department for the blind up here. I can add that logo. We recommend you do that. It makes your emails look more official. Same thing with a signature box at the bottom. Try to make it look official. That's just going to have a better impact on your constituents. Okay, I think that might be everything I want to show with this one. We talked about pipe text. This email is going to send for everybody who selects yellow. So I just saved that. And then you can toggle this workflow on and off right here. One thing that I do like to do is to test my workflows. That's what this Run Immediately button does. When you click it, it's going to say, it's going to ask for anywhere where I typed text, just to run an example. And so I'm going to fill these out real quick. And I'm just going to say yellow is my selected choice. When I do, I could do red here. It kind of ignores the conditions. It just assumes that all the conditions are met. But I'll go ahead and put yellow in here, and then I'll hit Run Workflow. This is a great way to test your workflows to make sure they're working. Another thing you can do is go over here to the run history, and you'll see that this workflow is currently in progress. If I click this drop down right here, I'll see that, okay, the trigger succeeded and it's working on sending the email. So you just keep hitting refresh until it's done. This one looks like it failed, which is actually good. I can go in here and show you what to do when it fails. So if it's failing, I can go over here and view the JSON. If you go to output, it will say why it's failing. The task is configured incorrectly. And so let me see what else I can see on here. Maybe I didn't want this to happen because I am not sure what I configured incorrectly. Response created. It might be because it's not published. Let's just make sure I have this all set up correctly. Nope, I'm not quite sure. I'll have to do some more digging, but let me run it again in the meantime. And we'll see if we can dig around and see what happened. This is very typical. I usually can't get it to work the first time I'm trying it because I've plugged something in incorrectly, but we'll give it another try and see what happens. In the meantime, while it is running, I do want to show you some other workflow options. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Add Task here. You can run more than one task in a single workflow. I've done some that have 20 or 30 different tasks that it's running. So I'll go ahead and hit Add Task here. We have a Google Calendar one that can go add a Google Calendar event to a calendar. So if you are using Qualtrics for some sort of scheduling need. These two, Microsoft Excel and Google Sheets, these are two of my favorites. You can add your Microsoft account into Qualtrics. If I just click on it here, I can add my Microsoft account, and then I can go through and choose which workbook I want to add data to, and I can choose which sheet of that workbook that I want to add data to, and I can have Qualtrics add a line of data each time a response is given. So you'll get your responses in real time into your Microsoft Excel or into your Google Sheets project. So really cool workflow there. Again, one of my favorites because Excel is easy to work with. We also have a directory if you need to add contact info. I don't know if you do plan on using the directory, reach out to us first, include that in your response ticket, because we do want to make sure we're using the directory correctly and that you have the right settings and that you have your own contact list. And then lastly, we'll probably use the rest of the time to talk about tickets, creating a ticket, because this is where we are using what we call closed loop. Before, sometimes people would fill out a form and it would just send an email to a random employee. And if they moved on to a different role, sometimes the email didn't get changed out. And so tickets help us better serve our constituents. So I'm going to do a ticket workflow here. And actually, since this one wasn't working quite as I wanted it, I'm just going to create a new workflow. Our trigger is a survey response. I'm going to leave out the conditions and go straight to the ticketing workflow. So every time this survey is completed, I can create a ticket. So it's going to ask for some details for the ticket. What's the priority, low, medium, or high? What's the ticket name? I'll call this color survey. And then ticket group and owner. These two are going to be important. If you have, there's kind of a difference. We have ticket groups, and then we call these ones ticket teams. It says assigned to a user or a team. There's a difference between the two. Group is the ones overseeing the ticket. So if you need visibility into the ticket, then you would be part of the ticket group. If you're responsible for actioning on the ticket, then you're part of the ticketing team. So let us know as you're building your survey if you do need a ticketing system. This is where we have a question about which email should be part of the team. So determine who should be receiving these tickets. And then we can bring in things like the score or comments. The score we talked about a little bit. Sometimes for most of the time, we just leave this blank. You'll see that it's optional. But this part, ticket data, this one is important. So you're going to add what data you think should be shown in the ticket. So I'm going to say favorite color, and then we pipe in their favorite color. What is your favorite color? Selected choices. We'll add another field. Maybe we say first name. Pipe in their first name that they provided. I can do last name. I'm going to do email real quick. Email, I can add phone number, I can add whatever data that I've collected, question data, embedded data, metadata, whatever I want to add, I can add it here. And then down here it says follow-up details, and I have checked use Qualtrics Survey Editor to create a follow-up questions. Let me show you without that real quick. But when I see the tickets, let me open an example of a ticket so you can see. Going to go to the ticketing system. I've talked about the hamburger menu. So if you need to check out the ticketing system, go here and then go to tickets. This will show you any tickets that are assigned to you. Right now, there are none assigned to me. So let's make a test ticket real quick. I do need this to go to me. So I'm going to add the trainer account. Okay. And then I can have follow-up questions. This is for the agent who is filling out the ticket or helping the customer or constituent. So did you reach out to the constituent? We can say yes, no. So I'm creating kind of a mini survey right here. Let's see, actually I want this. Oops, I had a question. Text entry. What was the outcome? Maybe this is data that I want to collect. I want to make sure that my agent who is responding to these, that they're providing this information. Could be more. I've had some, Jessica is working on one right now with me where we ask about 20 or 30 follow-up questions. And again, this is for the agent. This is internal, okay? I can allow the users to see the full record, meaning the full survey. And then this one, I actually like to turn this one off. This is just a kind of an are you sure box when they go to close the ticket. It's kind of annoying, but for some use cases, it is very helpful. So we'll go ahead and save that. Let me make sure everything's correct on here because I already did one wrong today. So we'll save that. And let's go ahead and run this. Let's say red is my favorite color, first name, Hunter, email. Okay, we'll go ahead and run that workflow. And then importantly, like Jessica said, we need to name this, create a ticket for, and we'll put that survey ID in there. Okay, so that's our ticket workflow. Let's go to the run history. Let's see if this one worked. That's good, it worked. So a ticket was created. Again, I can go in here. I can click on view the JSON. I can see the data that was input into the ticket, and I can see the output. Right here, it did create a ticket. That's kind of the serial number for the ticket. It always starts with T dash. The name of it is Color Survey, the owner name, and so it looks like our ticket was created. So I'm going to go back to the ticketing. If you remember, I can get there by going to the hamburger menu and then clicking tickets, but I have the tab up here already. So I'm just going to pop over there and refresh this page. It looks like I do have a ticket. It's probably still getting in there. Let's see. Check our run history here. I can't remember the ticket number. 3038. Just because I don't want to wait for it to come through. Sometimes we can search them and they show up. So there's my ticket right here. And this is what the ticketing system looks like for my agent. So they get in there. I see that I'm the owner. That's the name of this account, Trainer1. The priority was automatically set to low, but maybe as I'm reading through this ticket and I see that it's higher priority, I can change this priority to high, right? I can see the ticket data, and this is the data that I chose to include. You can choose to include more, but here's my ticket data, and then you can see my follow-up questions over here. I'm going to say, yes, I reached out to the respondent. The issue was resolved. And then I'll hit submit. Okay. Other things we can do while we're working on this ticket, I have some comments down here. If working with IT to resolve issue, reach out to Tim. I can submit that comment there, and it will keep a record of any of my comments, or if I'm working on this ticket with a team, we can kind of communicate via the ticketing platform. Down here is the change log, so I can see anytime changes were made to the ticket. So if you remember, I did change it to high. I can see when I added answers to these follow-up questions over here. I can see, and they're timestamped, so I can see when that happened. I can see file attachments. This is kind of nice. If I can add attachments to it, or I can see, I can include file attachments in the ticket data up here. So if you're using that file upload question, I can quickly access those files to help manage these tickets. Another thing I can do, because I included this field email, I can use the send email function. Just be aware of the from email, who it's coming from, and decide, okay, do we want this to come from their Qualtrics accounts? Where do we want to make sure this is coming from? And you can see that it automatically populates this with the email of the constituent. And so I can start messaging them from here. I can say, we're sorry to hear that you had a poor experience. How can we help? Right, and then I can send that email off. The nice thing about doing it in here is it will be tracked as well in the change log over here. Might need to refresh it. Oh. I can see the email history, and I can track all of that right within Qualtrics, right within the platform. Lastly, I can change the status. Right now it's open. I can change it to in progress, meaning I'm saying that I'm indicating that I'm working on it, right? And then I can change it to closed when I'm done working on this ticket. this is really why the closed loop system is so powerful, because then I can filter later and I can see which tickets haven't been closed. I can also create dashboards based on the ticketing system. So I can see which records are still open. I can see how long they were open. So how long does it take for me to resolve an experience? That's kind of our bread and butter, is we want to make experiences more efficient here at Qualtrics. And so the longer a ticket is open, that's usually a poor experience for our constituents. Again, I think I mentioned this yesterday, but we eat our own dog food. We are using the ticketing system to help us review surveys. And so we're very cognizant of how long a survey is taking to get approved. And so we use it too, and it's helpful on reducing those times and helping us set goals on how quickly we can get a survey approved. So that is the ticketing system. Jessica, is there anything you want to mention about the ticketing system?
I did put a link in the chat. On August 27th, when Hunter did a demo, he did a true use case scenario, the Capitol Complex, where it's kind of like a scheduling request. And he walks through it. You can see the whole dashboard. Sometimes it's harder to see the whole beginning to end when we're building it. So I do encourage you to check out that resource that I just put in there. You can find the YouTube chapter where he talks directly about ticketing. Sometimes it had more examples on that. So I do encourage that. As for the state, I think this is a really good time to enhance and make better experiences. One of the practices, and I know this because I built 50 Google Forms in my previous life and many more. We used a lot of the email system, right? So a lot of the information that we're passing back and forth, we managed in an inbox or a shared account. And sometimes we just didn't know if it got taken care of, right? And so this is really kind of a change that we would want to use a closed loop system. In addition, when we talk about another layer that we haven't even touched base, you can actually do dashboards off this in a future training. Again, not here and now, but you can actually report. So if this is a high volume, again, executive leadership might want to be able to view that dashboard of how many calls did you have this week, or how many tickets came in this week, excuse me, where are we at in progress? Like, it can get so much bigger as we think about it. So I just want to encourage that. Also, the question that was brought up about emails. Yeah, that's a really good thing. You get a notification if a survey is been submitted. You can email yourself. Again, I can't emphasize what you pass through that email is always important. So always think about that. Maybe all they need as a constituent would be, yeah, we received your response. Thank you so much. We'll respond to you in 2 to 3 business days with more information. So just be very cautious of what you send via email. And lastly, the ticket system is going to be a little bit, I'm just going to be humble and honest here, is going to be a little bit clunky. We really would honestly, if you are thinking about integrating a ticket system, the best way I would do is come to the office hours and let's make sure we set it up correctly for you so you don't have to redo anything or do anything. Like, let us learn our lessons too and what we need to communicate with that. So if you're interested in a ticket system, you see the value, this is where an office hour or schedule a time with me directly, and we can make sure that we get it set up correctly, and then we can document exactly what those steps are. We know that we want you to use it. It's very powerful. And so just kind of, we never want you to redo it, because that's one thing that the ticket system probably belongs in a service account, right? If it's a ticket system, it's probably going to last longer than when you win the lotto, right? And so we want to kind of think about those infrastructure things for you. So please, we want you using it. You see the value, but just kind of maybe, that's why we have it in our intake, is that we kind of make sure that we get everything set up on the back end for the brand admins can assist you. So Hunter, am I saying that correctly, or do you want to articulate it better? Maybe I'm a little tired today. I don't know. But do you have anything else you want to add about that portion of it?
No, I just want to emphasize, and I think Jessica kind of talked about this, that we are just showing you the basics today because we want you to understand the art of the possible. I'm always really excited to see what people do with this, and some of the ideas that people come up with are very creative, because again, there are automations around this. I can have a workflow that once I answer these 2 questions, the workflow can go and change the status to closed, right? We have an update ticket workflow, or I've seen people, based on these answers, it sends these answers to the constituent via a workflow. So there's workflows upon workflows upon workflows in Qualtrics. So it's exciting to see how creative people get with them. One that I always like to do, I'm going to go back to our workflow builder here. If I'm looking at this ticketing building workflow, I have this check mark that says notify this user via email when a ticket is created. This just sends a generic email that says a ticket has been assigned to you, and it gives them a link so you can click right on that link and it'll open the ticket right up. It'll take you right to this page when you click it. And so that's nice that you have a way to get directly into the ticket via email. So the email's still there. However, I am not always a big fan of this because, again, it's just a very generic email. So sometimes I'll turn this off and I can write my own email. I'm gonna go ahead and hit save here. And I'll go and make that email workflow that we talked about earlier. And I'll have this go to me, right? If I'm the one handling the tickets. Or I can pipe in information like the ticket owner's email right here. So whoever the ticket owner is, I can pipe in that information. And I can even do things like I'll put in my subject. I can pipe in, since I've already ran that ticket task before, this is the cool thing about Qualtrics Workflows is that I can pull data from a previous task. And Qualtrics is pretty smart about run one task at a time and then moving on to the next task. So if I'm in here, I can say, okay, I need a link to the ticket. So I'll click on this and it's going to pipe in a link to the ticket, and then I can hyperlink it here, link to the ticket. I'll copy this, cut it, I guess. Go into my hyperlink, put in that URL. Again, this will pipe the text into the URL. And if you remember, we do want to set our target to new window so that we're opening up a new window and not replacing our email window. And then I can hit save. And then this will take me right to the ticket. So I've created my own notification because maybe I want to put some additional information, like maybe I want to pipe in the name so that you have just a little bit more to work with in your email notification. So that's one creative thing that I've seen with workflows. But again, you can do workflows upon workflows upon workflows. The whole point of this is to automate your lives. And so if you have ideas, please come to the office hours, because myself, Brooke, Jade, whoever will be sitting in on those office hours, we have seen a couple things. And so we might have some ideas of how we can automate this, make your life easier. Again, that's why one of the reasons we do have the review process is to make things easier, quicker, and more efficient, and just have a second set of eyes on this type of thing. So as we're getting started, it will be extremely helpful. Okay, so I think that's all I wanted to share today on workflows. It's a little bit quicker of a training. Tomorrow we'll be talking about data and analysis and results and reports. This is how we look at our data and visualize our data. Again, we kind of alluded to the fact that you can make a dashboard based on the ticketing system. So we can build reports for several different things. The idea is to visualize our data, tell a story with our data, and really hit home with what our data are actually telling us. So I think I will end there. Jessica, if you have anything you want to add, if not, maybe we can jump into questions.
No, I guess I just want to put my old trainer hat on. Like, there is a lot here, right? Like, sometimes you just got to get in it and play with it. We do have a significant amount of hours with Qualtrics, and yes, we have plenty of things assigned to them, but one of their main goals for the next 3 months is to support and train you. So again, we want to kind of get you educated. You're also going to help us. We did do a pilot, which did help us figure out some of the things that we needed to figure out, but I know we haven't figured it all out. So we need to hear from you. And so we want you to reach out, and we'll try to guide you, and then we kind of make best practices as well. So again, just support's here. Don't get frustrated with it, because it is a robust, but it's very intuitive as well. So